Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's 20-year grip on power is in the balance.
All signs are pointing to a runoff in the presidential election. With almost all votes counted, Mr. Erdogan and his closest rival, Kemal Kilicdaroglu, have so far failed to secure at least 50% for an outright win. Mr. Erdogan is ahead by some 5 percentage points.
Mr. Kilicdaroglu has vowed to win at the runoff expected in 2 weeks' time. Voters would then have to choose between extending Mr. Erdogan's power grip or returning to a more secular path promised by Mr. Kilicdaroglu.
It could come down to this third candidate. Sinan Ogan garnered 5% of the vote. Who he endorses in the runoff could make or break the presidential ambitions of the key rivals.
For more, we're joined by Dr. James Dorsey. He's Adjunct Senior Fellow at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies. Firstly, what's your read on where things are with this runoff now likely?
Well, I think that we all expected that there would be a runoff. What I think was not expected was that the gap between Erdogan and Kilicdaroglu, the opposition candidate, would be as large as it was. It was expected that it would be a neck-to-neck race. Sinan Ogan, the third candidate, is at this moment undeclared in who he will support in a runoff. But given his background and given his ambitions, he comes out of the MHP, the nationalist party and a coalition party of Erdogan's, and he has been wanting to become the leader of that party. It's more likely that his voters are going to opt for Erdogan than for Kilicdaroglu. So Kilicdaroglu's chances really depend on two things. One is how the balance in the vote from the overseas vote falls out, and that was traditionally pro-Erdogan, but you've seen a split in the overseas vote as a result of a large number of people leaving Turkey in the last 5 years because of political oppression, and whether or not, which way the major cities, Istanbul and Ankara, go.
Inflation has surged and the Turkish people are facing a cost of living crisis now. How much did the economy weigh on voters' minds this election?
Well, I think one of the miscalculations, if you will, in terms of the predictions for this election has been that it would be the economy that was going to make the difference, that it would be the earthquake that Turkey suffered in earlier this year. And fact of the matter is that Turkey is as polarized as are many other countries, and Turks traditionally vote along party lines, along ideological lines, and I think that's what you saw this time.
And Erdogan has been president for Turkey since 2014. Before that, he was prime minister since 2003. Are we seeing his grip on power loosen, or what do we put this down to?
Well, I'm not sure we've seen his grip on power loosen. I think what we've seen is far starker polarization. Go back to several years where he lost an election and then canceled it, and it was reheld. He won an election, but not with the degree that he wanted. He canceled, and then he really lost it. So this is an open race, but the odds are in favor of him.
The U.S. has been frustrated with Turkey, with Erdogan at the helm. Meanwhile, Kilicdaroglu has expressed wanting to forge closer ties with NATO. What impact are these results going to have, do you think, on relations with Washington?
Well, I think that the United States, as well as Europe and NATO, are going to wait and see, first of all, whether indeed we are going to have a runoff, and then how that runoff plays off. One would assume that the West, Europe, the United States, NATO would feel more comfortable with Kilicdaroglu, certainly if he acts on what he has promised during the election campaign, which is a realignment with NATO, a realignment with the United States, and he signaled also a somewhat more distant relationship to Russia.
Yeah, Turkey is rather well placed sort of in between the East and West, and where it sort of leans will be watched closely. So with the wider geopolitical implications then, just map them out for us, the differences between Erdogan or an opposition victory?
Well, Erdogan has basically taken an independent route. A lot of his rhetoric has been anti-Western. There have been issues over migration. There have been issues over the Turkish acquisition of a Russian anti-missile defense system. There have been issues over in Syria with regard to the Kurds. So there have been multiple issues of friction between Erdogan and particularly the United States, but also Europe. Kilicdaroglu promises to go back to what has been a more traditional Turkish foreign policy that is much more aligned with Western nations. And of course, playing into that is his promise to roll back all kinds of restrictions and restrictions on democratic rights, freedom of expression, freedom of the press in Turkey that have occurred under Erdogan, particularly in the last 10 years.
And just 3 months ago, earthquakes claimed more than 50,000 lives in the country. Where does this election leave Turkey in terms of rebuilding post-earthquakes?
Well, rebuilding remains, of course, a major priority. I think the real issue is that you had a major earthquake in 1998. I remember that my own apartment was turned upside down at the time. And it was clear that Turkish construction was not prepared for earthquakes in a country that is on a fault line. And I think that's the issue that's come to the fore in the earthquake that we've seen this year, which was devastating. I think both parties will be putting major emphasis on reconstruction, and their political futures in many ways will partly depend on that.
Appreciate your time today, sir. Thank you very much. That was Dr. James Dorsey, Adjunct Senior Fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies.